Welcome to the HR Community Podcast. My name is Shane O'Neill, founder of Civitas Talent, the HR and HSC recruitment community. Each episode we will host HR leaders and discuss their journey and discover best practice HR solutions across the HR industry. Whether you're a CEO, HR executive, or operating across the wider HR space, this podcast is for you. Please like and subscribe, and don't forget to comment and share your reviews. Enjoy the episode. Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of the HR Community Podcast. Very excited to introduce our guest this morning. Isabelle Guaran is the Chief People and Culture Officer at Deaf Connect. Welcome, Isabelle.
Shane, how are you?
Very good, very good. Thanks for joining us this morning. Really over to you again, Isabelle, to tell us a little bit more about your role, essentially, a bit more about yourself and the organisation, and we'd love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, well, Deaf Connect is a community services organisation where I describe us as growing, innovative and inclusive, and I think we're really focused at the moment on creating all kinds of different opportunities for deaf and hard of hearing people in different ways. I think what makes us quite different is we're a bilingual organisation. So we use Auslan, which is Australian Sign Language, and English at the same time in our workplace.
Amazing. And in terms of in terms of your role, Isabelle, tell us a little bit more about the breadth of it and what you look after and where essentially.
I look after risk, culture, although culture is everyone's work, as I'm always saying. Yeah. Safety, quality also sits in my patch, and learning and development, and also our reception team, and of course HR. And that, I think, is just such an incredible opportunity to influence so many areas of the organisation, because even reception is most employees' experience and most external clients' experience of the organisation. Quality is sort of linked to the services that we deliver. Risk and our reporting culture is really critical to having a safe, healthy workplace. And HR and culture, obviously having those difficult conversations with managers and employees and trying to make the Deaf Connect a great place to work is a pretty great opportunity to have.
Amazing. And I know over the last couple of years you've been within the not-for-profit sector in general, but let's track back a little further. We'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey into HR, why you got into HR, and sort of take us through that story.
Oh, it's probably a bit of a winding path. I have a law degree and a creative writing degree, so I definitely didn't see HR being on the cards. But I did a leadership graduate program and ended up in employee relations. And I worked in rail and maritime, two of the most industrialised sectors in Australia at a state and then a national level, where I think I learned a lot about people and influencing and change, as well as the law. And I actually took a career break in 6 months. I worked on permaculture farms, and that really helped me reset what I wanted to do in my career. And I then went into the community services sector, and from there into HR. And I really feel like I've found a home in the community services sector. And another interesting thing that I've been reflecting on recently is at the start of my career, I really hid the fact that I'm a deaf person and that I use a cochlear implant. I tried not to talk about it, tried to hide it, and now it's part of my identity at work. And I feel so lucky to have been welcomed into an organisation and a community where I can be my whole self.
How cool is that?
It's pretty cool.
It's really cool. And I mean, in terms of the experience that you were talking about initially, and I know we've spoken about it before, that sort of heavy ER, IR, industrial type experience. How advantageous do you think that experience was to, I guess, where you are now in terms of your more executive level HR career?
Oh, hugely. I think industrial relations and employee relations can be a bit intimidating and scary. And I think because I've spent so much time on the front lines of quite adversarial workplaces, that doesn't faze me. And I also learned through trial and error, which I was lucky enough to have the space to do, that trying to be directive, getting change that way is actually really not that effective. And influencing people, finding out what matters to people and being authentic in how you influence them is how you can achieve real change and have real impact. And that's, I think, a really valuable reflection to have in a C-suite role.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked a little bit there about, being a bit more open about your hard of hearing, and then finding yourself at Deaf Connect, which has obviously enabled that openness. Do you feel there's anything organisations out there can be doing? Doesn't need to be specifically in your sector, but is there anything that organisations could be doing to maybe promote a bit more openness and inclusion and diversity?
Absolutely. And it's something I've thought of a lot, being part of an organisation that does use Auslan, which I think most organisations would see as a barrier or a cost, but we see it as a huge advantage. I think my reflection on also sharing my story, even in a previous workplace and my disability, was that there are so many people who lived experience of disability who don't talk about it and aren't sharing that experience. So telling stories, I think, is really critical. But to do that effectively, you have to have people in leadership roles who have lived experience of disability. You just don't know what you don't know. So I think when you have that in the leadership space, and that includes maybe culturally diverse backgrounds as well, when you have that in the leadership space and it's being talked about and shared, you're inviting employees to do the same, to bring their whole selves to work, to show up authentically. And that's such a powerful lever to pull.
Yeah, it really is. And I know we've spoken about some of it before as well. I was really intrigued by Auslan because that was something that I wasn't really across until recently. So would you mind sort of telling us a little bit more about Auslan and what it is for similar individuals like me who might not know enough?
Well, you have picked it up quite quickly from what I saw. Auslan is Australian Sign Language. So all countries have different sign languages. And even in Australia, the East Coast and the West Coast have slightly different sign languages. And it's a tool that deaf and hard of hearing people can use to communicate without spoken language. It's not just hand shapes, it's mouth shapes, it's expression, it's all sorts of non-hand related elements that are incorporated into it. It's so rich. And I think I really, coming into it, underestimated the level of nuance and the complexity of Auslan, which has words that there aren't English equivalents of. Like, it's a fully developed, very complex language. And on top of that, there's a culture that sits with Auslan. So the deaf community have a very rich culture, and Auslan is a huge part of that. And it's just such an open community and culture. Like, they welcome people to learn it and to participate. And I think everyone that I've met who uses Auslan has taught me something, whether I've asked them to or not, and I'm very grateful to that.
Yeah, and some of the other guests that I had on throughout this series, we've talked about, the war for talent, for example, and we discussed how more remote working business models and hybrid models can really open up your talent pool. Would you say the same for, not specifically the Auslan community, but let's just use that as an example. If companies start to maybe be a bit more open and invest a little bit more in Auslan, for example, that they will actually open up to other talent pools that are out there. Maybe there's individuals out there who aren't applying for jobs because they're not really confident that the organisation can support them as well.
Yeah, I think remote working and hybrid working are fantastic. I think for us, it's been a bit of a challenge because Auslan is a visual language and it doesn't translate as well over Zoom as it does in person. And because we have an organisation that actually has another language than English and another culture, if you're a new person joining our organisation, it's really hard to get your head around both of those things unless you're being exposed to it in the workplace. So we found that we need a mix of remote working and in-person working to support people, but the flexibility of being able to get someone who's just perfect for a role and so passionate about it and have them work in a completely different state is fantastic, and we've done that as well.
Awesome, amazing. And talk to us a little bit about, well, I guess going back to sort of your journey again through HR. Talk to us a little bit about how you've seen HR transform over the last, 5, 10 or so years with, working from home 10 years ago, I know for me wasn't a thing. It wasn't even something that you would request. So tell us a little bit more about, your sort of views on the transformation of HR.
I think I actually haven't been in HR for that many years because I think employee relations is a bit of a relative of HR, but it's not quite the same thing. But my outsider and now insider perspective is that maybe in the past HR's been a bit of a gatekeeper of rules, of how to do change, policies and procedures, and also a protector of the employer. The employer comes first and their interest comes first. And I can really see a shift now to more authentic, intuitive HR skill sets being looked for. Anyone can enforce a bunch of rules and policies, but we're looking for people who are going to really get the most out of others in the organisation, who are going to add value. And so HR increasingly needs to be able to talk about commercial aspects and operational aspects and add value to an organisation and to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of looking at the future, I guess, current and future, Isabelle, like what challenges do you sort of see or maybe predict for HR professionals out there?
I think the pace of change is just only increasing. I don't think that's going away. And I feel like we've been in a state of crisis as an organisation, or organisations more often than not recently. And that demands really different skill sets from HR practitioners. You can be great at HR, but if your organisation's going through major change, if there's huge time pressures, you just might not operate well in that environment. So actually being able to operate under pressure, to make difficult decisions in a really fast-paced environment, to drive connection where people are working remotely and the workforce turnover might be high, those are all tricky skill sets to recruit for and to grow in yourself. But when you do, I think you'd be a really good HR practitioner.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I feel like, especially you mentioned with the sort of more crisis phase, I feel like the decision making can be quite challenging as well, because you sort of need to act really quickly. So you kind of have to trust your gut and your instincts. And obviously some of that comes with experience. What kind of advice would you give to maybe more upcoming or aspiring HR leaders in regards to that? Is there a particular area of HR you would recommend them to get involved in? Is there certain tasks or responsibilities that should start to put their hand up for now in their current roles? Or
that's a great question. I think being open to being wrong is pretty important. Learning new things is important, and it's not one particular thing, it's just being open in general, because change is going to keep happening. You're going to be under a lot of pressure. And if that's an environment that you can learn to thrive in and enjoy, then that will stand you in good stead. And I think also understanding your own ethics and values is really critical, because HR's full of grey areas and you can't use a policy to get you through some of the situations that come up in HR spaces. But if you know your values, and then when you're in a tough tough situation or you need to make a difficult decision, you can just come back to that and you can operate from a place of authenticity. And just putting that into practice in your conversations, in your work, I think is a good skill to build.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I totally agree. And I think with you mentioned about the just being open, not to always be right. Bit of advice I was given a long time ago was fail fast, fail forward, and fail often. And I think some of us, I know I used to be a bit like this, where I would be a bit concerned failing or looking like I didn't know the answer in front of managers or leaders or stakeholders. But I think something that COVID has definitely taught us as well is we're all human, and sometimes it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be open about your you not having all the answers. So no, I totally agree with you. Just running on from that, I wanted to sort of ask you a little bit more around upcoming leaders, because we get a lot of HR professionals listening to our episodes, and they're constantly asking me questions around breaking into different sectors or industries. And I know you've done that. Again, what kind of advice would you give to some of these either HR leaders or aspiring leaders, Isabelle, who are looking to break into different sectors or industries, knowing that they don't have the knowledge right now?
That's tricky, because I value sector experience, but it's definitely not a prerequisite, because how you do HR, I think, matters a little bit more than what, because the what can always be learned. So I think if you're trying to break into a sector and the interview or the recruiter, you might need to just make that link for them and sort of say the community services sector, for example, needs X skill set. I've done these projects which relate to the needs of the community services sector, or whatever sector you're trying to break into. So I think just drawing that link between your own experience and the needs of the new sector you're going into is important. It might be change management, it might be commercial turnaround. Those happen in every sector. So those skills are completely transferable. So you might just need to draw that link for the role that you're trying to get into.
Absolutely. Love that. Well, look, I'm mindful of your time. I've just got a couple of sort of more short answer, quick questions to run through with you, Isabelle. So I'll crack on into those. Most influential person?
I think CJ Craig from The West Wing.
Oh, okay. Best lesson learned?
Know when to watch and wait.
Office, working from home, or hybrid?
Definitely hybrid. Best of both worlds.
I agree with you there. Who do you inspire, Isabelle?
Well, I think, like I said, being open about your shortcomings is the only place you can learn and grow from. So I do talk a lot about my mistakes and the things that I'm not good at. And I hope that I do inspire other people to do the same.
I'm absolutely certain you do. Not that I think anything frustrates you, but what frustrates you, Isabelle?
I think when people don't ask for help.
So important. So important in so many ways. I think that's a really good point. And how do you keep mentally focused?
Well, there's an assumption in that question I don't think is quite right. Look, I think just coming back to why you're doing what you're doing. So I really passionately believe in the vision for the organisation I'm working for. So if I'm doing board reporting that might feel a bit onerous, I just think, but how is this going to deliver on that vision? And it absolutely is. And so then I can refocus. But I think it's really important to do nothing sometimes and to relax and switch your brain off.
Yeah. I actually don't know the answer to this question, so I'll be really interested to hear is favourite sport or hobby?
It's bouldering. It was a bit of a lockdown convert, indoor rock climbing with no ropes. So flexibility, strength, but a lot of creativity as well in solving the problems on the wall.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. If you could have dinner with one person, Isabelle, who would it be?
Be my partner. I get to do that a lot. So that's cool.
I mean, you kind of have to say that because they're going to be listening, right? Last one, which I think is on everyone's mind at the moment. If you were to get time to break away, what would be your ideal treat or holiday experience?
It's some kind of remote camping. So no reception, no toilets, but no distractions, just nature.
Yeah, just nature, some bouldering maybe to get involved in.
If I'm lucky, yeah.
Awesome. Well, look, thanks so much. Always a pleasure, Isabelle. Some really amazing responses and information and insights in there for all of our listeners. So thank you so much for jumping on today. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you. Thanks, Shane.
Thank you for tuning in to the HR Community Podcast. Remember to like and subscribe and share your views and comments below. This podcast was brought to you by Civitas Talent, the HR and HSC recruitment community. Whether you're a candidate looking for a new role or organization looking to secure brand new talent for your team, please get in touch with us today. Thank you.